again. Bad logic, Andrew. You just heard a perfect example of a woman that was willing to sleep with a man within an hour. Her body count was 0. This is why men prefer younger women, easier, less baggage.
Yeah, but I actually brought that point up.
Wait, why
would that be gross?
Yeah, wait, why is that gross?
Re-say the comment. That sounded really gross.
Okay, I'll pull it back
You said
up.
that men prefer younger women because they have less baggage.
Yes, that's a gross thing to say.
No,
How's that?
gross
Gross to target younger women because they have. It's predatory. It's extremely predatory.
How's it predatory? And
to
how's it
target
gross?
younger women because they have less experience.
So
that's something that like
target-
abusers and groomers purposely say they look for victims. They look for people that are less experienced.
So this is the feminist loaded language. So
you earned that green in your hair.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So you use the term targeted, predatory, right?
Yes.
So
Loaded terms.
couldn't I just say that women target wealthy and successful men and they're predatory for targeting wealthy and successful men?
Yeah.
Or is it just the reality, the sort of evolutionary biological reality that women tend to be attracted to men of status, men of means? There's a couple reasons there. One, a guy of high status could have certain benefits to her and her children, right? So why is that any different than men preferring a younger woman who would be a better partner because she's not a better partner because she's younger. She's just easier to manipulate. That's genuinely a thing that happens. I could actually make this other
argument.
argument.
Very often.
Actually, so I could make another argument. So a woman who's, say, 33 and still single, she is perhaps, because of the time clock when it comes to pregnancy, look, you can get pregnant well into your late 30s, 40s. I can actually just make this argument about easier to manipulate. A woman who's a little more pressed to get into a relationship, she's easier to manipulate because she's like time's ticking.
Yep.
And I can manipulate. Hold on, let me make the argument.
Okay.
I can manipulate her better because she has a greater
desire.
Desire. No, there's another word I'm thinking of. A greater urgency.
Yes.
Because of her greater urgency to enter into a relationship, she must be easier to manipulate.
That example also sounds like you're a gross person. That example
Not
is
at all.
not
That
less gross.
does not make him sound like
But-
gross.
but
Like,
you're saying-
you're making him sound predatory.
But you're saying
Well,
by
he's
virtue
saying
of
that this
somebody's.
person is purposely manipulating a woman that
No,
is
he's not
close.
manipulating anything.
I'm saying
He used the word manipulation.
No. You made the claim that younger women are easy to manipulate, but I could say that
They are.
Right, but hold on. I am making the argument that you could manipulate somebody at an older age for other reasons.
Yes, that's also disgusting and predatory, but also
Right, so but why do you
that's also not an overwhelming problem in our society.
But why do you jump to the
Neither
conclusion?
is age gap relationships.
Why do you jump to the conclusion that a man who wants?
I got hit on considerably more by older men when I was 16 than when I was 18.
Not interested in talking about.
We're not talking about that.
I'm talking about adult relationships. So we're talking about 18 and over.
So we'll talk fresh 18.
So young woman means
what
adult.
What does fresh
18 and over.
mean?
They just turned 18.
So what? Can they vote?
Yes, but your brain is not fully developed.
Then why are you voting?
25.
Then why are you voting at 18?
Because that's different.
Why?
How's it different?
Okay, so first of all,
so
that
you
law
can
is...
So you can vote to affect my life?
Do you know why that law is set into place and why 18 is considered an adult? It's so that they can enlist young people into the military because based on our physical...
Young people or young or men?
Men.
Okay.
Young men into the military because
not
at 18 is when they are physically able to serve.
Nope.
That is based
Actually,
17.
16-year-olds.
It is not based off of... 18 is fully formed. Your brain is not fully formed
so just
until
to be clear,
25.
you're fine.
Now, I'm not saying that any 26-year-old going for an 18-year-old is predatory and problematic. However, that is a big issue that I do see often. I do see a lot of women, young women, 18 women, fresh into the dating scene, getting taken advantage of by 30-year-olds.
How do you know
that is so common.
What evidence do you have that they're getting taken advantage of? Is it simply by virtue of them dating?
Their experience.
How is that?
And they speak about it.
How is that?
And they speak about it. And abusers And groomers specifically have been interviewed and have talked about the fact that they go for younger women because they are easier to mold.
You have to stop making every man as if they're like being predatory.
Actually, I'm willing
I
to
don't
totally.
believe every man is.
I'm totally
but-
willing to engage with this. I think
But
that.
but it is
I
a
think
problem.
at this point, this
Look,
point is fine.
it's just a
Not all
stereotype
men,
being
not all,
put
not
out
all men
there.
are abusers. Not all men are rapists. But
Yeah, let's not
overwhelming
use that word.
majority of women have had a negative experience with a man.
Totally
And
agree.
That is
so,
fact.
So let's back up. I want to make sure I understand.
Mm-hmm.
When should women be considered adults?
I think women should be considered an adult and making adult decisions probably around 25.
Because of the prefrontal lobe.
I would because of the prefrontal lobe. Yes.
The prefrontal lobe that begins degrading immediately after 25.
I believe that
Hang on.
a woman
The
who is
prefrontal
25
lobe-
is very different
Yeah,
than a
hang
girl
on,
who's
hang on.
18.
Hang on.
That's so
Why?
different. Wildly different. They
Why?
have wildly different viewpoints.
Why are they different at 25?
They're inexperienced.
Okay, but
They have
no, that's not what you
Prefrontal
said.
lobe.
Wait.
And the prefrontal lobe is also a
okay,
factor.
so hang on. If you're going to make this justification, I need you to actually make it.
Okay.
Are you an adult at 25 because your prefrontal lobe is fully developed?
I would say that's a factor. It's also experience.
Okay, but experience is.
And I would say-
Hang on.
It's a
A
direct.
21-year-old is
Experience
like a young adult.
But experience is arbitrary. You can have 19, 18-year-olds
Yeah.
far more experience than 25-year-olds.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is
so,
a factor
so
for
because
sure.
that is so, there's no way that we could base adulthood on experience. There would be no test we could give for experience.
No.
So if you're looking for physicality, the prefrontal lobe is it?
For physicality, yes.
Well, then if that is the case, don't you think that women should not be able to vote until 25?
I wouldn't say women shouldn't be able to vote. I would say.
Well, we're talking about women being able to consent. So you don't think they should be able to consent until they're 25?
I think voting. I'm not saying that no one can consent. I'm not saying no one can
But
vote.
I thought they weren't
I'm not
adults.
saying that every single woman that is 30, she's 18, he's a 30-year-old. I'm not saying every single instance
I'm not saying
is
that
a
either.
woman getting taken advantage of.
I'm just following your logic. Are they adults at 25
You're
or
not, because
before?
I feel like you're making a very broad blanket statement,
Because
and I'm not making a broad blanket
wait,
statement.
you
I'm
are.
saying this is a
You
problem that is happening. There are men that
Yeah.
are doing this. Not all men.
So when are women
Not all men.
adults? When? When are they adults?
Adults, I would say a human. I would consider an adult woman 25.
If you consider them to only be adults at 25, why the fuck would you ever advocate that men or women can ever make any decision which would impact their life in the long term before the age of 25,
'Cause that's just
including consenting to sex?
Because that's just the world we live in.
That's not an
That's
answer.
not
And
an
also,
answer.
but the
Because
age,
it
the,
is?
the age of consent is also not 18. It depends state to state. It's very, very different.
Yeah, but I would guess that you would want to eliminate that for non-adults, right?
Depends on the age range. I think an
You
18-year-old
don't want
having
a
sex with an 18-year-old is very different than a 30-year-old
Sure.
having
Yeah,
sex
we'll-
with an
we'll go-
18-year-old.
we'll go with
I
that.
think it's very, very
Yeah,
different
we'll
dynamic.
go with that. But if you're not smart enough or competent enough or experienced enough to make a decision about who you want to sleep with, regardless of their age, why the fuck would we give you consent to sleep with anyone? You're not experienced enough to make those decisions, right?
Because it doesn't apply to all, and I'm not saying it applies to all. Again, I never said every
You said
single.
it-
I've never
you
said.
did say all.
I've never said.
I asked you
every
when all
single
women
situation.
are adults. When are all of them adults?
I guess. Okay, then I'll rechange my statement. It depends on the person. It depends
So
on
how
your
could you ever
definition of
create a
adult.
metric for it then?
I think that people who are 25 should be going for people who are around the same age range. I think it's a very huge red flag when men who are 23 and older are going for 18-year-olds, especially 18-year-olds there's 18-year-olds that are still in high school.
So?
They're graduating high school. So you think someone in high school should date someone who's a grown adult who has a 9-to-5 job?
When are they
It's
adults?
weird. It's weird. That's
Why
all
is
I'm
it-
saying.
what makes it-
It's
okay,
weird.
let's get
it's
into this.
gross. It's weird.
Just saying,
And I
it
think
gives you
that
the ick.
that's valid.
It gives you the ick.
Yeah, it gives
Can
me
you give me an
the
actual
ick.
argument other than gives me the ick? Like an actual argument for why this is wrong.
Yes, it puts a lot of women in having that blanket. It puts a lot of women in very, very uncomfortable situations.
What
when
about
they
all
get
the
taken
women that
advantage
Okay,
It's
but that's you
choosing
haven't.
to be
Hang
in
on.
that-
Every
why would
relationship
it
can
be
do
bad?
that.
They are choosing to make that decision.
Yeah,
that
all-
doesn't mean that it's not gross. That doesn't mean that men that are purposely 30 years old targeting 18-year-olds are not a problem. doesn't
do you
mean
think?
they're not a gross
Do you
human
think that
being.
based on the fact
Just
that
because they legally can.
okay?
doesn't
Do you
mean-
think?
know they
Do you
gross
think that
it?
you should be able to outlaw it?
No.
Well, then how much of a problem could it be? Don't
It's
you usually
something-
outlaw behavior
all
that's
I said
problematic?
was gross. I said ew.
It's
I
just duck?
disagreed with it. I can disagree with an opinion. That doesn't mean we're going to base a law off of my opinion.
Okay, so you,
I don't speak for an entire country.
okay, so you don't think
I speak for me.
So
and I think that that's gross.
yeah, you just think it's icky.
I think that's extremely icky.
Yeah, sure, but you don't actually
And
have
I
an
think
argument.
any 18-year-old, 19-year-old women
Yeah.
that are watching this podcast,
I agree.
I would steer clear from men. I would say most men who are like 23 trying to date 18-year-olds, it's because they're unable to get women their own age because they lack maturity.
So let's move it back, okay, before you go off on these other diatribes, and we'll just stick with the one. Can you actually make a moral argument for why it would be wrong for a 30-year-old man to date an 18-year-old girl if they both consent to it?
No, it's like a red flag. So it's not like, it's kind of like you were saying with like a flight attendant. It's a red flag because there is flight attendants that maybe aren't sleeping with a bunch of guys, but there is a stereotype there that most of them are sleeping with a lot of guys. So no, not all 30-year-olds who are dating 18-year-olds have negative intentions. However, I would say a lot do. There is a stereotype
Yeah, but I would
about
make
it.
it.
There is a
I'm
lot
going
of
to give you the
conversation
caveat
with that.
distinction. I would say that a flight attendant who is sleeping with a lot of men is doing something immoral.
Right.
Would you
don't
give
think
me?
a 30-year-old
Would you give
taking
me?
advantage of an 18-year-old?
Yeah. So I'm
is
asking.
immoral?
So I'm asking you to make the moral argument like I just did.
Right.
That thing immoral. What about 30-year-old with 18-year-olds actually immoral?
When they're both consenting.
Yeah.
It's just really the
Ick.
fact that you
Hang
don't
on,
see a
just
problem
say
with it is
ick.
insane. to me.
Just say it's
It's
icky.
insane to me.
It's icky.
It's
Why?
insane
Age
to
is
me.
nothing but a number.
It's insane to
I'm
me that
a
it's insane to
23-year-old
you.
and I would
Mandatory.
never date an 18-year-old in high school. I think that's
That's you.
crazy.
She's not an
That's
adult
you.
yet.
Well, first of all, they don't at 18. They don't have to be in
in
high
What do they
school.
have? What does a 30-year-old have in common with an 18-year-old
Let's
girl?
say-
Why can't they date
Listen,
women
why
their own
do you
age?
think that men and women have all this shit in common? They don't.
They do?
No, yeah.
Me and my
Oh.
partner have a lot in common.
What do you have in common?
Witchcraft. We're both hot. We both are artists. There's a lot I have
You're
in
both
common with
artists.
him. I
Oh,
see
well, we
his
both.
soul.
Okay, so then by this
we
criteria,
have very similar childhoods.
hang on, you ready? By this criteria, we both have jobs. We both drive in cars. We both walk down streets.
both
I guess
hair.
we have both.
we both have hair.
We have very similar passions. We have very similar desires. We both have the same viewpoints on marriage. We have both have the same viewpoints on polyamory. We both.
And
have
what
the
do you do
same
for fun?
viewpoints. With him?
No, what does
Or
he do
just in
for fun
general?
that you don't do for fun?
Video games.
Yeah, he plays video games.
I play video games too, but we play different.
Yeah, but
video
I mean,
games.
he plays.
Yeah.
He's a player.
He hangs out with
player
his
of the
friends.
video games, right?
Yeah, he plays video games, hangs out with his friends. So.
Do you have the same friends?
No, not really like that. Like it's like I'm friends with his friends, but they're his friends.
What's
like
the
if we broke up, I would never talk.
What's
to
the
his friends.
girliest thing that you do that he doesn't do?
I don't know because he lets me paint his nails. He puts eyeliner on, and honestly,
okay, so the
it's the
girliest
most
thing you do.
attractive
Dating a
thing
Excuse
I've
me?
ever encountered.
Yeah.
And he's not a female.
Oh, just joking.
He
But
can
if-
put
if-
on
if
eyeliner,
all
and that
it
doesn't
is-
make him less of a man.
If all
He's
it is
very
a
secure of his
if
masculinity.
all it is
That's
is
what
the
I love about
idea
him.
of a commonality of interest, then I would just give you the same argument back. We both drive cars. We both have jobs. We both do this. We both do that. We both do all these things. So we must have all this stuff in common. Not really. A commonality is not necessary between two people that they're interested in the same external things. That's not what creates a deep connection between human beings. For instance, if my wife really hated the type of food that I really liked, what the fuck would that have to do with us having anything in common? Nothing. Nothing. Honestly, that would have no bearing on whether or not we deeply loved each other.
Yeah,
So the thing
and I'm
is,
not sitting here and saying that there isn't 30-year-olds that are dating 18-year-olds and they have a healthy dynamic. I'm not saying that isn't
I'm not
a factor.
saying you are. I'm just
But-
looking for this idea. If you tell me a flight attendant's out there sleeping with many, many men, I'm going to say that's immoral. I'm just asking you to say it's immoral for a 30-year-old to sleep with an 18-year-old and give me the justification for it.
I wouldn't say it's immoral for them to sleep with an 18-year-old.
So it's
I would
just
say it's
icky.
immoral if they're purposely targeting 18-year-olds.
Okay? Why would that be immoral?
Because they're purposely targeting women with lower experiences, oftentimes because they're easier to manipulate and control.
Let's just assume for a second that that's true, that these men like to have women around that they can manipulate and control. That's part of their dynamic. Do you agree with me that there's plenty of women who like to be manipulated and controlled?
Or the younger women like
Some
older men 'cause they're
dynamics.
more
I think that that's a
established, they want
very,
peace.
very. It's a rough topic because a lot of the women that put themselves in those situations come from very, very rough backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean,
and so I
maybe.
think there is
They
an
don't
argument
deserve
to
love.
be made that maybe
What if
if
it's their
they had
kink?
more respect for themselves. Yeah, and there's kinks that I disagree with. I'm not a kink shamer, but there's kinks that are
Yeah, I get it. But if
morally wrong.
if you can't tell me why it's immoral, and you can just say in a circumstance where this 30-year-old is targeting an 18-year-old, right, for nefarious purposes, then I would make the counter argument that anybody targeting anybody for nefarious purposes, it's immoral, regardless of their age. So if an 18-year-old's targeting, or a 30-year-old's targeting an 18-year-old for a long-standing relationship, finds her to be beautiful,
sure. I think it's just more.
What's the actual issue there?
It's more dangerous for an 18-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man than the other circumstances.
I mean-
Why is it dangerous?
Yeah, what's the danger?
but
these are
while
these,
it would be more dangerous, there's also benefits, right?
I guess there's benefits to an 18-year-old dating a 30-year-old. I
Financial
would
stability?
say overall, for an overwhelming majority of people,
Their Almed Meatball donated $200.
Thank you, Mr. Meatball.
Him on Team
Appreciate
30 and 18.
All right, he's on Team 30.
It's really amazing because there actually are really compelling arguments against the age gap argument. But the people who feel the most firmly against it never give any. They just say, ugh, it's gross. And I'm just like, that you can't base your life on
Yeah.
what's gross. If so, then we would have outlawed all sorts of things that you know, probably like LGBTQ. A lot of people find that gross. Do you think that that's acceptable?
I think that's a very different topic.
Do you think it's acceptable that they do?
Because some people find it ick. So it's
They do.
But I never once said we're going to outlaw 30-year-olds from dating 18-year-olds.
I
never
agree.
once
You
said
didn't.
that.
But if you have the response of telling people you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't, and you say, well, why? Why should? Because I think it's gross.
Well, that's what I said. I said because oftentimes it sets women up for failure. It sets
a lot
women
of
up
time-
to be in very, very toxic dynamics.
Well, essentially-
this is just something that we have
Essentially,
seen.
every relationship now is set up in a toxic dynamic because most of these marriages are ending in divorce. So they seem like, regardless of the age group, they seem to be highly toxic because they're not lasting a long period of time. If you look at the UK, there's the Office of Statistics in the UK. That's literally what it's called. Okay. They went through and they took all of the marriages that have ever happened ever in the UK, which included age gap marriages, to see if it was true that those types of relationships failed more than relationships within a similar age. They couldn't find any significant deviation whatsoever.
Yeah, I would assume they wouldn't.
Why?
Because oftentimes the 18-year-old in question is getting groomed.
Oh, well, this is interesting.
They're getting groomed.
Wait a second.
It's- and it's not
hang
always
on.
the case,
Then
but-
I would expect to see those relationships work out more.
Yeah, they would.
Why they don't? They
Because-
work. There's no significant deviation between the people who are engaged in a similar age relationship and those who are in this age gap relationship of 20 years or more, by the way. No significant difference. If it was true that those younger women were being groomed or something like this and by some type of super predator who brainwashed them, I would expect that you would see those relationships have a much bigger longevity than similar age with the same experience, but you don't. That's really weird.
So my grandma actually left my grandpa for a man that was 30 years younger than her. They stayed married for 55 years, and he was right there at her deathbed.
How old was she and how old was he?
He was, I think, 20, 21, and she was in her 40s, 50s, almost 50.
Predator. Fucking
weird.
predator.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say
Predatorily
it.
stalking through the jungle, waiting for the chance.
Never
to
met two people more in love. I mean,
I never said it was every single
but you-
circumstance,
but-
but
so-
I'm saying it's something that
But it gives you the
it's something that we shouldn't put pressure on.
Heck,
I
It's
have a
something we shouldn't be
question.
putting out. It's something we shouldn't be normalizing, in my personal opinion.
we're not normalizing
You can
it. We're just saying it's
disagree
not.
Well, I have a
but that's why I
question.
disagree
each
with
their own.
that opinion.
Just a clarification, because I like when you guys talk and you want to define a word. So you keep saying the word grooming. So from what I know, what the word grooming is, it's taking someone and slowly acclimating them to get used to something that is immoral, gross, disgusting.
Right.
So where in it does an adult and an adult groom an adult into
This is what I'm talking about.
into a
with the
consensual adult
this is what I'm
relationship.
talking about with the
Unless they're
pre-parental.
grooming them into now you're going to be a murderer, now you're going to be a
That's right.
thief.
That was my
There's no
point.
grooming happening because I am an adult. Both people are adults.
Which is
Grooming
why
only
this is-
happens
An
from-
18-year-old adult is
an
different
adult.
than a 30-year-old.
It's still an
adult
adult.
in a lot of circumstances because
It's-
your prefrontal cortex has not developed.
Okay,
Sorry, I
but
choked.
here-
But
here's-
I have a
still an
stutter.
So let's
adult.
get into the prefrontal cortex because it's an argument often used by leftists. Would you agree with me that your brain development is highly dependent upon body nourishment?
Yes.
And do you agree that poor people have worse nourishment than rich people?
Yes.
So then I have to ask you, would you ever recommend that a rich person gets together with a poor person because their prefrontal cortex is not going to develop correctly?
Depends on the people and depends on the circumstance.
But wait, it's all about the prefrontal cortex. So I got to ask you,
they
if
still
this is
develop a prefrontal cortex.
yes, but not correctly, right? Not correctly. So just based on nourishment alone, by your argument, okay, there could be women who are 25, as long as they're just in a lower socioeconomic, position, they should not be dating, or rich people should not be dating them, even if they're in the same age group, because
You don't know that rich person's background. You have no idea what their
we're just
going to
say on
is.
average.
There's rich people.
Why would that not be
were
icky?
not born rich.
Wait, why would that not be icky though? If this person had all the right nourishment so that their prefrontal cortex developed correctly, and then the person who was poorer probably didn't have as good a nourishment, so it didn't. They could never be at the same level, even if they were 25, right? Mm-hmm. So they shouldn't date,
I mean,
right?
there is a lot of circumstances where that does happen, and that is a big thing where women do get set up with financial abuse. They do get stuck in relationships where they are financially dependent.
So
on
who
a
the
rich
fuck
man.
is allowed to date who in your world?
Yeah.
Anyone can date anyone, but I can say that there's red flags and there's warnings, and women should protect themselves.
They should protect themselves from a rich
Yes,
man
Every man?
who's taking care of them.
I think women should have their own financial security set up when they're dating a man, because you never know. You could be with a man for 20 years and then he divorces you, and if you don't have say you don't have a prenup, you don't have anything set up, you haven't worked
The
for
red
20
flag.
years. You're
No.
fucked.
The red flag would be to the rich man, right? To say don't date poor women because their brain isn't developed correctly because their prefrontal cortex was stunted because they didn't get the correct nourishment.
Well, most rich men don't want to date poor women.
No, actually, au contraire, they don't care because they're looking not at the prefrontal cortex that they don't give a
I
fuck
would
about.
disagree.
They're looking at how hot they are.
I would disagree.
And they don't care about
I would
money. They already
disagree
have it.
because the
Wait.
social circles that rich people are in are very different
Hold
than
on.
the social circles poor
So
people are in.
I do need to do an intermission because we have a backlog